This lesson is the notes on adding and subtracting polynomials. First, we talk about like terms. Like terms are defined as having the same variables and the same exponents. When adding and subtracting polynomials, you add and subtract like terms. For adding, you're going to remove any parentheses and then rewrite each term. Combine like terms. Note your final answer should always be in the simplest terms. Okay, so let's look at the very first example. And we have 12m squared plus 4 plus 8m squared plus 5. So there's nothing outside the parentheses that we need to multiply through them. So basically, these parentheses could be removed right now. And all we're going to do is we are going to look for the like terms. So I have 12m squared and 8m squared. And they're both positive. And there's all pluses there, so we're just going to add the coefficients 12 and 8, and we get 20m squared. That's a 2. And then we have a plus 4 and a plus 5, and we simply add those. And so that is plus 9. So that is our very first example. And so we have 20m plus 9. Okay, let's look at our second example. Now again, we have parentheses, but there's nothing outside the parentheses to be multiplied through that. And there's not a negative that we need to distribute. So again, we can just look for the like terms and combine them. And so this, let me make this a little bit bigger. It looks to be I'm going to pause this. Okay, this lesson is on adding and subtracting polynomials. And so the first thing we need to look at are some terms. Like terms are defined as having the same variables and the same exponents. Those are the terms that we can combine. So when we add and subtract polynomials, you add and subtract like terms. When you're adding polynomials, remove parentheses and rewrite each term. Combine like terms. Your final answer should always be in simplest form. Now, if we look at example 1, we have 12m squared plus 4 in parentheses plus 8m squared plus 5. So there's really nothing to distribute throughout the parentheses, so you can just go ahead and remove them at this point, or we can just add from here. So we have our like terms 12m squared and 8m squared. So those are like terms. We can combine them, and so you just add the coefficients, and we get 20m squared. And then we look, and we have a plus 4 and a plus 5, and we simply add the 4 and the 5, and we get plus 9. So our final answer, that is a 2, is 20m squared plus 9. All right, so now let's look at our second example. See if I can move my picture. Sorry. Not sure if I can, but I'm going to try. There we go. Okay, let's look at my second example here. Again, we look at the parentheses and we see that outside the parentheses, there's nothing to distribute as far as a term, and there's a plus between the two parentheses. So really we're just looking for like terms. In the first parenthesis, I have a 6x squared. In the second one, I have a 2s to the third power. You always want to put your largest power first, go in descending order. So there's no other term that has that s to the third power. So I'm going to start there. And I am going to just bring that down. So that is 2s. Let me move over a little bit so I have room. 2s to the third power. Okay, and so I've used that one. And so now I look for the power of 2, and I just have this plus 6s to the power of 2. And now I have a positive 3s and a negative 6s. So those are like terms, so we need to add the coefficients. 3 plus a negative 6 is going to be a negative 3s. And then lastly, we have a plus 7 and a minus 4. 7 minus 4 is 3. And so that is how we would combine part B. All right, so let's look at the next problem where we have a little bit more work to do. Okay, so here we're going to first have to distribute the 5 that is outside of that parenthesis. Okay, parentheses. I'm not sure if I spelled that right. But so we're going to follow the steps and first multiply everything that's outside the parentheses. So we have 5 times 2x squared, so that is going to be 10x squared. Then we have 5 times a negative 3x, that's going to be a negative 15x. And then 5 times 10, and that is going to be 50. Now here we also have a plus sign, so we don't have to worry about signs here. So we're just going to multiply a positive 3 times a 3x squared, and that's going to be 9x squared. 3 times 2x is 6x, and then 3 times a negative 10 is a negative 30. And then we just look for our like terms. Let me change pen colors here. I have a positive 9x squared and a positive 10x squared. So we add those and we get 19x squared because we're just adding the coefficients. Then I look for my x terms and I have a negative 15x and a positive 6. So we're going to add a negative 15 to a positive 6, and that's going to be a negative 9x. And then we have a positive 50 and a negative 30. So positive 50, negative 30 is going to be a positive 20. And so that is the next example. Okay, now let's look about subtracting polynomials. Okay, subtracting polynomials is the same thing as adding the negative. Okay, so we'll show you what we mean by that, but you're adding the negative. Okay, so you're going to remove the parentheses from the first expression and rewrite each term with the correct sign. Let's put it right here. With correct sign. When you remove the parentheses from the second expression, change each term to the correct sign, okay? And then you just combine like terms. Okay, so we'll look at some examples here, all right? So I'm going to give you a second. You can always pause the video if you need to. But I want to clear that, and then let's move to these examples. So the first one, we have 2x to the third power plus 4x squared minus 6. And then you'll see we have this negative here. Okay? And so this negative has to be distributed throughout this parenthesis. So the first parenthesis, there's one right there at the beginning, sorry that you can't see, but this is 2x to the third power plus 4x squared minus 6. Now we need to change these signs. So it's going to be a negative 5x to the third power. And a negative times a positive again is a negative 2x squared. And then this is a negative times a negative, so that becomes a positive 2. So what the most important thing is to be careful with your signs. Now it's the same as we did in the first. We just look for like terms. So I have a positive 2x to the third power and a negative 5x to the third power. So it's 2 plus a negative 5, or negative 3x to the third power. Then I have a positive 4x squared and a negative 2x squared. So that's 4 minus 2. So I have a positive 2x squared. Then a negative 6 and a positive 2. So that is a negative 6 plus 2, and that is negative 4. Okay, you can always use your calculator to help with the coefficients, just not the x terms. All right, let's look at the next example here. So I'm going to move this over and we'll look at example B. And so you can see that we have again that same negative in the middle here. And so that is going to be distributed throughout this parenthesis. So the first parenthesis we can just rewrite. 8c to the power of 4 plus 2c plus 3. And now we're going to change each sign in the second parenthesis. Minus 3c squared. Negative times a negative is a positive c. And then negative times a positive, we just change every sign in that second parenthesis. Now we look for like terms. So let's see what we find. This is the only c to the 4th power, so I'm just going to bring down my 8c to the power of 4. This is my only c to the 2nd power, so that's a negative 3c to the power of 2. Now I have a positive 2c and a positive 1c. So 2 plus 1 is a positive 3c, and then I have a 3 minus 1, so that is a positive 2. And now we have simplified that. All right, so let's look now at what happens next. Okay, so here, what it looks like when we have first to distribute outside the parenthesis. So we're going to distribute the, let's see if I can change that quickly. The 5 that's outside the parenthesis through each of the first terms to each, through each parenthesis, and then we're going to multiply the 3, or distribute the 3, sorry, and combine like terms. Sometimes I'm not sure exactly what they want in those blanks, but let's see what it looks like, okay? So let me move this. We have a little space. So we are going to now work the problem. So we're going to do the 5 times the 2x squared, and that's 10x squared. I think we already did this problem, but let's do it again. 5 times negative 3x, negative 15x. 5 times 10 is plus 50. Oh, I think what changed was this negative right here. So negative 3 times a positive 3 is going to be a negative 9x squared. And then a negative 3 times a positive 2x is going to be a negative 6x. And then a negative 3 times a negative 10 is going to be a positive 30. So it was almost the same problem. So now when we go to combine like terms, we'll see that we have 10x squared minus 9x squared. So that's just 1x squared, or simply x squared. We have a negative 15x and a negative 6x. We add those and we have a negative 21x. And then we have a positive 50 and a positive 30, and that's a positive 80. Okay, you can, hopefully those examples were good for you, and there's going to be some practice.